Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Scowl Method Podcast. Actually, episode number 33, Fasting for Life and Soul. Now, previous episodes, the last two episodes actually had our second guest on here, Dr. Asari Christian, or as I call him, Dr. C. That was a 2.5 hour long conversation that we had to split over two episodes because, everybody's attention spans. But it was such a blast. And, shout out to Dr. C. Thanks for jumping on. Thanks for dropping all this knowledge and sharing your perspective on, the healthcare industry, doctors, peptides. I mean, listen, we went over so much. If you hadn't had a chance to listen to it, go back, listen to those episodes. They are chock full of information. All right. So, meantime, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well out there. Listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio, and you're listening to the Scowl Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. And it's been a little bit since I actually recorded something here, so let's get these warm-ups in. Let's go. I'm under attack. Yeah, under attack. I'm not one to, judiciously proclaim that the enemy's coming at my neck or coming after me or anything like that, or the enemy's busy, or the enemy, is doing things. I'm not that type of Christian to say the devil's busy or, the devil made me do it or anything like that. Like it's nothing like that. But lately, maybe for the past 2 months, honestly, just been taking just shots, just straight stiff jabs to the face on a number of different occasions. In every arena of my life. And it's, it kind of perks my ears up a little bit, right? The spidey sense is tingling because there's one common thread amongst all of these things, all of these occurrences, and is that it seems to happen around a point in time where somebody is about to achieve some form of breakthrough, and I have something to do with it, and I'm helping in that regard. So, I'm reaching out to a bunch of people, right? Because that's what I do. Reach out to people, see how I can help them grow, but not just grow in this realm, but grow in all aspects of their being, right? So grow in their thinking, grow in their feeling, grow in their soul, as well as growing, physically, and not just in their body, but maybe in their business, within their family, things like that. So I noticed every time some person that I was helping out, one of those people that I was helping out was right at the edge of that breakthrough, and they just needed that last little bit. That's where I come into play. Something happened to me, right? And man, it's just too much of a coincidence. So I'm not a big believer in coincidence in the first place, right? So it's things kind of work out in a particular order, in a particular manner, and I never really signed up with the whole it just so happened to fall this way. No, well, it happened that way for a reason, right? There's a reason for everything. But again, that's me, okay? So understanding that, I take these attacks and let me, dig into that a little bit. I got so I had a regular cold. I don't get sick that often, but that is what it is. People get sick. So what, right? But then I ended up getting bronchitis for the first time ever, and that was something else. And I'm like, okay, bronchitis, bro. I mean, I knocked through the cold and then came back with a like 102 and some change fever and was just out of it. And then the like an unholy burning in my chest. I mean, my chest was on fire. Couldn't breathe, all that stuff. So you get the idea, right? The next thing that happens is I rupture 2 blood vessels in my nose. And then come to find out, I go to an ENT and all that fun stuff, and come to find out I have a deviated septum, but never had that. Like, that was never, like, I had it checked before. That was not the case before. So it's just like, what I would do, just cough my nose sideways? Like, no. Like, so it's just weird things. And, you know, I guess they could develop, I don't know, right? Like, I'm just sitting there like, okay, of course, right? Of course. And then, you know, that takes me out a little bit because I had to get those things kind of cut off from bleeding again. Because essentially what happened was my nose was slightly to the side, deviated to the septum was deviated to the side, and the blood vessels, prominent blood vessels, and they were kind of like bending. So any type of pressure, it was more prone to like just on me. Well, when I was coughing my head off during, you know, having bronchitis and all that fun stuff, man, it wasn't stopping. So anyway, I'll spare you all the additional gory details, right? But, you know, you have that happen. And then, you know, there were things that were going on with all of my relationships, everybody that I was connected to. There was just some weirdness, some things going on that I didn't cause myself, and it's just it was interesting. But it was, you know, it broke a couple of the relationships altogether. Yeah. So, and then you get to a point where it's just like, then I'm all of a sudden being tempted with a whole lot of money, to do something that's outside of my purpose. And yeah, that's one thing where you kind of just look, this is almost turning into a little like a counseling session for me now, right? But they kept coming. They kept coming to even to the point where somehow it was set up that I was met up with this other doctor, and you know how I feel about doctors in general, right? So, you know, I met up with this other doctor, you know, and I'll kind of cruise over the details of how I got to this doctor, but this dude had me questioning everything in life, but not in a good way. So, you know, I take all of these things that were going on, and all this stuff kind of happened in a condensed period of time. It's basically over the last 2 months. And something would always break, or something would always happen just before I would have that meeting, or have that phone call, or have that conversation with someone who's about to get their breakthrough, right? Who's about to level up in a sense, in spiritually or mentally. They finally broke that stronghold that was holding onto their family for decades. And it's just like, and it's just interesting because they're about to get their breakthrough, but I'm the one that's getting licked up. It's just, man. So it just was far too coincidental. And then, you know, I have a lot of plans, and let's just say a lot of plans for the studio, for the Say Cheese and Lift brand, but like for this space in general. And we're operating those, and we're working those now as we speak. People are going to be helped out. People are going to change. People are going to be able to grow. They're going to be healed. They're going to be better through some of these processes, through some of these things that we plan on doing here. And so my spidey sense was up. My spidey sense was tingling. It was like everything. I was kind of on high alert, right? Ready, sort of. So I thought. So one day, this is after the gazillionth nosebleed and before I actually had the procedure done to my nostril. I was just like questioning everything. This is right after I get from talking to this this other doctor, and I'm questioning everything. I'm just like, yeah, I don't even know what's going on. I'm trying to do the best I can. I'm trying to do good things, but maybe I'm out of position again. And so I look. I called my pastor, Pastor Franklin. Hey man, listen, I'm going through it. and I'm not even sure what's going on. I'm confused, right? And then I know this story is kind of going a few places here, but I gotta bring all this in at one time so you can kind of understand how I got to this topic exactly, right? And I think you can kind of draw the links now, right? But I'm talking to my pastor, and it was funny because I'm explaining to him all the the again stiff jabs I'm taking to the chin, and he starts laughing, and he's just like, and I'm just sitting there like, what's this dude laughing at? But then I'm like, okay, and he was just like, brother, it's not like you're doing something wrong, right? It sounds like you're doing things right, and you put yourself on the radar, and I'm like, cool, that's great. But yikes, if this is what it's like from here on, this is going to be tough. And basically, in short, I mean, he told me a bunch of things, but in short, he was just like, you got to step your game up. I'm like, okay. He was like, you got to pray like you never prayed before, and you have to fast like you've never fasted before. And I'm just like, And he's like, you better get on that praying and fasting. And I'm like, so, my mind automatically went to the fasting part, right? Because I fasted before. Not as often maybe as I should now that I think about it. But it wasn't a regular habit. So before I did anything, I kind of dusted off the old notebooks and stuff like that, and I started to redo a study on fasting. And the crazy part about it is fasting is such an interesting topic to me because of its duality, right? Most people out there, most fitness gurus or most health nuts and all that fun stuff will tell you about the benefits of fasting purely from a physical or a physiological perspective. And it's fine. I'm going to do a little bit of that as well in this episode. But there's this big portion of it that's just like that. I'm not sure as many people talk about. I'm not sure not as many people talk about it. Right. And that's the spiritual side of it. Like fasting has been deemed a religious process for thousands of years, right? Like it's a thing before we were even worried about things like, losing weight or whatnot and all these buzzwords like autophagy, blah, blah, blah. Like nobody was worried about that. It was a religious process. It was a spiritual process. And many religions have taken on this idea, this practice of fasting. Of course, as I'm talking about fasting, I'm going to talk about it from the Christian perspective, right? I can't tell you about Ramadan, right? That's not my spot, and I'm not necessarily going to go hyper, super general about the idea of fasting either. I'm going to purely talk about it from the Christian perspective and from the physiological perspective, okay? So, what is fasting? So, fasting is the restriction of food and or water intake for a certain period of time. That's where you get, breakfast, break fast, right? Because you're not eating or drinking or consuming anything overnight. So with first meal in the morning, you're breaking that fast, break fast, right? You get it. So why would you want to do that though, right? Like, why would you want to? Well, naturally you have to do it because you can't eat while you're sleeping, right? Well, even though some people, that's a different story. Some people do that, but in general, you can't eat while you're sleeping, right? But why would you want to intentionally set yourself up to do that for an extended period of time, or a different time other than when you're sleeping? There are a number of physiological benefits. There are a number of spiritual benefits, and I'm going to try and list the majority of them. I'm not going to be able to cover every single one, but we'll start with the physiological ones, and then we'll move into what I deem to be the more important ones are the spiritual ones. So from a physiological perspective, fasting, and again, remember, I'm going to kind of sound like a broken record. It's restricting food and or water for a certain period of time. Okay. Fasting basically affects your hormone levels, especially the ones that pertain to your metabolism, right? And I'll give you two in particular, right? So the first one, what it does is it lowers your insulin, right? So it decreases insulin, and what it does then in turn is it forces your body to, or signals your body, not necessarily forces your body, but it signals your body to burn more fat or to burn fat, right? And that's basically how you get into this state of ketosis, right? So all my keto zealots out there, that's basically it, right? So, but it also, on the other end, so it decreases insulin and it also increases glucagon, right? And glucagon is produced by the pancreas, and it does basically two main things. The first main thing it does, though, is it signals the liver to release stored up glucose. So like that glycogen that ends up getting stored, and I talked to you about this in a few, maybe more than a few, maybe like 10 episodes ago, where glycogen is stored. It's stored in the muscles, and it's just a breakdown of, the carbs, basically, carbohydrate. It's stored in the muscles and it's stored in your liver. So what glucagon does is it signals your body to release that stored up glycogen in your liver and release it into your bloodstream, okay? But it also does another thing. Glucagon also signals to your body to produce glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. Now, this is not as efficient in general, but your body does it, right, at some point, right? So for the most part, though, most of that energy is coming from the glucagon, but your body will then, and that process is glycogenolysis, right? And then when it's producing glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, that's gluconeogenesis or gluconeogenesis. You know what? I'm probably saying it wrong both ways. So, but you get my point. Both of these hormones, though, insulin and glucagon, they act opposite of each other. Okay, so it's just like, insulin goes up, glucagon goes down. Glucagon goes up, insulin goes down, right? So that's basically, so fasting affects the balance of those two hormones, and it affects other, hormones for your metabolism as well, but we'll stick with those to start, right? Fasting also supports gut health. It increases, or it can improve the diversity of gut microbiome, bacteria in the gut, both, right? It basically increases the good bacteria that you have in your gut. It can, right? It also supports heart health. It could reduce some of the factors for heart disease, like high blood pressure, cholesterol, and certain markers of inflammation. And inflammation, of course, I probably talked about that ad nauseum, but you get the idea when it comes to inflammation. Not all inflammation is necessarily it's not like a good or bad thing. It's just a balancing thing, right? Like, you don't want too much inflammation, but some inflammation is necessary for your everyday processes. It's also very necessary to signal other events and other adaptations in your body. You just don't want so much of it that you get burned out. You don't want the balance of inflammation to be on the side of, being too inflamed, right? But you also have, when it comes down to, we'll probably end up talking about inflammation again, right? But now we get to this topic, right? So I know you heard it before, right? It was a buzzword for the longest time, right? And this word is autophagy, right? People are going around talking about fasting causes autophagy, and it does. But there's a catch, right? So it basically, this process, autophagy, is a survival mechanism. And basically what the body does is it cleans up, repairs, and kind of recycles damaged, dead, in hyperused like cells, okay? So it's like a cell cleanup process. And what it does is it removes, like I said, repairs, cleans them up, recycles them. But this in turn allows for your body to create new, younger cells, to clear out the toxic and or diseased cells, and also repair cells that need it, right? Because we're talking, a lot of this stuff just comes down to the cellular level. How does this stuff work out at the cell, right? So fasting is one of the ways that you can get to autophagy, to start to induce autophagy. Now, for a while, and I'm not sure if this is still a thing, autophagy was this big, huge buzzword that was almost like married to fasting, right? And it was like that they were basically saying the number one benefit of fasting is autophagy, and the only way you can get to autophagy is through fasting. And well, and then they ended up, you had all these people going on social media, all the health nuts talking about, autophagy. And he was like, hey, listen, at 36 hours fasting, this is when autophagy kicks in and blah, 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 blah. And then come to find out they were wrong, right? They were, and maybe, okay. So I'm going to try and tread carefully here, but, you don't necessarily have to fast for 36 hours to jumpstart to induce autophagy, right? And fasting, in fact, is not the only way to get to autophagy. And I'll explain a little bit more, right? But more studies started to come out, and they kind of refined the idea of autophagy and how you started up and why it's such a good thing in the first place, right? So fasting, like I said, is a way to induce autophagy, but so is exercise, and coincidentally, so is any diet. So, after realizing that, fasting wasn't the only way to this process, they then went on to say that fasting was superior. It was the superior pathway to induce autophagy. And then that kind of came out to be, there was a few really well done studies that kind of put that to rest as well, right? And I kind of refer to Lane Norton on this one, because he did. He kind of blew it up, and he went off of this one well organized and well conducted study that that basically showed that you could get to autophagy through any of those other means. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with fasting. There's no magic in fasting from a physiological perspective, right? So be mindful when you're seeing stuff on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, and you have somebody talking about, well, fasting does all of this and it does all this stuff. And it's just like, well, yes, but you can probably get to a lot of those other things doing it some other way as well, right? So be very, very careful with the people who will proclaim that, fasting is this, magical process and that you can only achieve higher levels of health just by through fasting and fasting alone. That's not the case here. That's not how it works. Okay. So, like I said, I referred to Lane Norton on breaking down that study. So just like if you're bored one day, look up Lane Norton and Autophagy, and those. I mean, he has a whole bunch of videos out on Instagram, on his website and everything like that. And I mean, he breaks down that particular study and the conclusions thereof, right? So, and I think he's done a really good job of that. And this was, I mean, it might have been last year, actually, now that I think about it. So yeah, go check that out. But at the end of the day, like I said, it seems like autophagy in general is induced by being in an energy deprived state. I repeat, it's not necessarily just fasting. It's not even just exercise. It's not just one thing. It happens when your body is in an energy deprived state. In other words, when your calories are restricted. And you can restrict your calories a number of different ways. You can go on a diet, right? Like just a plain old diet, not having to deal with fasting. You could just eat 200 calories less a day. Your body's going to jumpstart autophagy. You could do exercise. You can exercise every day, changing the energy balance within your body. Autophagy is going to start that way, right? Or you could fast, and you could fast for a certain amount of time. It doesn't even have to be 36 hours. It could be one day. It doesn't even have to be one day. And your body's going to jumpstart autophagy. So, and at least that's what the study kind of brings up here. And more studies are coming out, basically corroborating that point, right? So again, I urge you all, just be careful when somebody's out there touting fasting as, the miracle, right? They're not necessarily being upfront with how the processes actually work in the background. Now, I don't know if that's because of lack of knowledge. I doubt it's that. And I have my own thoughts on that one, but I'm not calling anybody out. But be careful what you consume concerning that, right? And I mean, look, even take what I'm telling you with a grain of salt. Look it up, study it, check out those studies, watch those videos, look it up for yourself, right? I'm not going to tell you that everything that I say is 100% perfect either. But there's definitely a different intention behind what I'm saying compared to what they're saying. Okay, so and I'm gonna leave it. I'll leave it right there because I'm off track already. Right? Going back. So back to the inflammation thing. So fasting can help reduce inflammation, but this is also very important, particularly for people with autoimmune disease. Right? So fasting seems that, and there were quite a few studies here, a strategic fasting protocol seems to help out a lot when it comes to people with autoimmune diseases, right? And we can go through the whole list of those things, but it seems to alleviate the symptoms, many of the symptoms, and it also seems to kind of jumpstart or kind of like get their health a little bit better. So they turn out there's better health outcomes for people with autoimmune issues when it comes to fasting. Fasting can, and here, surprise, surprise, right? Like, duh, but fasting can promote weight loss. And again, it can do that. Because this is dependent on if you're actually at a true caloric restriction, right? Fasting is another diet in a sense, right? And, okay. And another side note. So I know there's this little, back and forth between whether it's like, straightforward, full day, full multiple days fasting is better than intermittent fasting, or if intermittent fasting is better. Listen, there are already enough studies out to show that they're both pretty much the same. So, again, I don't want to get so locked in on this one method over this one method or that, because a lot of this stuff ends up being the same thing for a lot of people. You got to get to the root of a lot of these things that we're talking about too, right? So in this instance, we're talking about energy balance, right? When it comes to autophagy, energy balance. When it comes to weight loss, energy balance. So fasting can help, but it won't if you're not at a caloric restriction. So let's just say you eat 2,000 calories a day, okay? And you fast for one day. You fast for Sunday, right? And that next day, the Monday, you end up eating 4,000 calories, and then the rest of the week you end up eating 2,000 calories. You're not likely to lose much weight there. Why? Because you're still averaging out 2,000 calories a day for that week. But let's just say you fasted for Sunday, and then Monday you went to your regular maintenance number, 2,000 calories. Well, now you're at a 2,000 calorie for the week deficit. Then you're more likely to lose the weight. So there's a thought there, right? You know, a lot of people are fasting. I was like, I'm fasting for, 2 days straight, and I'm still not losing any weight. Well, again, fasting in and of itself is not a magical thing, right? It's all about energy balance and that caloric restriction in terms of losing weight, right? So if you're not at a restriction, or if you're not at a deficit, you're not losing it. It's and you might, maybe, but then it's just like, it's also very hard to, like, all the maintenance calories and all that fun stuff. These are all estimates either way, but it's less likely if you're still averaging out the same calories over the week. Okay. So that's why, it's not necessarily like I said, it's not magic. It's not magic, but it is a good tool to use and treat it just as that. It's just a tool. Like, that's the thing, right? Okay, I'm going, this is tangent day apparently, but it's just like, why do we treat so many different things as like so many different methods and so many different ways to achieve health as like a sword? Like, we fight with these things, right? Like, you see it all the time. For instance, like, it's like, hey, look, the best way to lose weight is weight training. No, the best way to lose weight is cardio. Do both. Like, what's the issue? It was like, you have all these people just like, I do a run every single day. I don't need to touch a weight. Okay. So, like, it's just like, or the people are just like, man, I lift weights all day. I don't really care. I'm running. What am I doing that for? Okay. But people want to separate themselves in these camps so much. It's just like, what for? Why? And it's like, hey, look, I swear up and down, keto, that's the way to go. It helped me. It could help everyone. Okay. And it's just like, well, no, I fast. I do this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but you're both doing a caloric restriction. So what are we talking about? Like, it's just like, it drives me crazy. Everybody, look, but it's everywhere. Like, it's in fitness. You're like, hey, look, I do bench press with dumbbells, or I do bench press with barbell. And it's like, okay, well, there's studies that show is barbell is way better for overall strength gains. What? So, who cares? If you're lifting and you're improving your health, guess what? You're okay, right? So, but why do you have to get in this camp and start arguing with people? It's just, you know what? Here's the funny thing. They do the same exact thing with religion. All right, why are there so many forms of or denominations of Christianity? Because somebody didn't agree with somebody else on their theology. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't come back down to Christ, are you even Christian? So it's just like, so if it comes back down to Christ and we can at least agree on the core tenets of what it is, what he came to do and what he did, what are you arguing about? Like, it drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. It's just like, you know how silly it is? Like, do you know how silly it looks? Now, granted, I understand some of the arguments and some of the debates when it comes to falsehoods and truth. Okay, I get it. But even then, right, it's just like, at the end of the day, the truth always shakes out. It'll always shake out, right? So it's just like, I just don't get the debates. I don't get the arguments when it comes to that stuff. And I definitely don't get it when it comes to either a loss of focus, and that's kind of how I look at the whole religious denomination thing. It's a loss of focus. People have shifted their focus away from what's actually important, and they put their own spin on it. That's what it comes down to me. When it comes to fitness, people just want to be in camps, and they just, it worked for them. And I get it. It worked for you. But generally speaking, I mean, and that's another thing. Like, I don't know. I'm sorry. This is turning out to be ranty, but it's just like, so I was listening to this one podcast a long time ago, and this gentleman was on there. He's a business guy. And he was talking, he was just like, you know what? The world would be a lot better of a place if people understood overlapping distributions. And I'm just like, yeah. So it's just like, and I think the example they used was, no, I don't think he was a business guy now that I think about it. But the example that he used was basically, hey, generally speaking, men are stronger than women. Right. And it was like, ooh, hot button topic. Uh-oh, sorry. That's not true. It was like, physically, in general, men are stronger than women. Okay. But then you will always get those people saying like, well, I know some really weak men, or I know some really strong women that are stronger than some men. Okay. But that's not how it goes generally. And so it's just like, and that's that. So if people understood overlapping distributions, that you can have a mixture, but in general, the bulk of the population, this is what we're saying, and this is the statement we're making on that general population. So it's like, it's the same thing with like the same kind of situation we had with when I had Dr. C on here, and he was talking about the carnivore diet. Generally speaking, probably not the best, but there are people who have achieved positive health outcomes from the carnivore diet, right? Now, where he was coming from in terms of the carnivore diet, there's some studies that's being done right now as we speak. There's studies that came out recently that said, well, that's actually probably not a great thing, right? All I'm saying is from, and I don't really have a stake in stake. Dad joke USA. Listen, I don't have any, I just have to say it. I don't have a stake in this, but it's like, it's like you people are putting themselves in these camps so hard that they can't even really see what the truth is. What the truth of the matter is, right? And here's the thing, like this is another thing of overlapping distributions. In general, and this is what these studies are starting to pull together, it might not be the best thing for you. And a lot of the health outcomes that people are seeing, the positive health outcomes that people are seeing concerning this diet, is because of the elimination of other foods, which, by the way, is not unheard of other diets, like almost every diet, right? So it's just, But it's things like that. Like, come on, the overlapping distributions. That's a thing, right? So just because it worked for the small amount of people that you've seen, or it worked for you, so you're only like a population of one, right? So a bunch of these studies and statements that are coming out and that are being made are of general populations, right? So when people are talking about this stuff, they're talking about the general population. There's going to be exceptions to it all the time. That's kind of the point. So it's just like, all right, listen, let me pull up a little bit. Rant's over, I think, for now. But yeah, so those are, let's get back on track. Those are the physiological benefits, the physical benefits of fasting. Okay. Now, like I said, let's get to the more important ones. The more important ones that I see, the spiritual benefits. Okay. So, my fellow believer, why do we fast? And there are a number of reasons too. One main one, and there's a lot of other reasons that kind of trickle from this, but one main reason is to strengthen prayer. Okay? So, fasting is a form of self-denial. And again, I'm speaking of this from a Christian perspective, as a Christian. So fasting lowers, reduces, turns down, turns off the flesh and the noise that comes with the flesh so that your spirit may be amplified. And that in turn amplifies your prayers, right? So it eliminates the distractions we tend to encounter when attempting prayer. And almost every instance of prayer and fasting kind of shows this, where it's just like the prayers seem to be more fervent, they seem to be amplified, and they seem to be, well, I'll break it down a little bit more. Another reason, one of the reasons under this umbrella of, strengthening prayer is to seek God's guidance, right? In the book of Judges, the Israelites sought out God's guidance after essentially getting smacked up and beat down in battle by the Benjamites, or by the sons of Benjamin. And this is in Judges 20:18 through 28. Now, I'm going to have to put in a show notes because I'm not reading off all these verses, right? Because that'll make the podcast another hour long. But I urge you to go to these verses. I'll put them in the show notes so that you can see exactly what I'm getting at here, right? There are times where one would fast to express grief, right? They would, so think when Old Testament Saul fell upon his sword, and along with his sons and along with his armor bearer, so basically Israel gathered their bones and buried them, and they fasted for 7 days, right? And then when David got the news, basically he wept and fasted because, one of the Lord's anointed has fallen, right? That's found in 1 Samuel 31:13 and 2 Samuel 1:11, right? There's also Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat prayed and set a corporate fast for all of Judah in order to seek protection and deliverance from the Moabites and the Ammonites. This one is a big example of a corporate fast, of a group fast, like a bunch of people together fasting, right? And it's basically it's a really good example of praying for protection and deliverance, right? So all of Judah fasted and prayed, and their prayers were answered in a pretty tremendous way. Like by the time the men of Judah arrived to the battle, so they were, so here's the funny part. They were praying and fasting and they were late to their own invasion. So by the time they actually arrived at the battlefield, the battle was already over. Dudes were laid out. This is in the 2 Chronicles 20, verses 1 through 34, right? That whole story. So it's interesting. They were late to their own invasion, right? So fasting and prayer can also be used to express repentance and a return to God, right? Samuel told the entire house of Israel to get rid of their fake gods and redirect themselves towards God, and God only, right? They did so, and then they prayed and fasted. And I gotta get that verse locked in there for you. So, is also to humble oneself before God. Ahab, the king of Samaria, he did some dirty things. You know, you might not know who Ahab is, but you know who his wife is, Jezebel. And she did even more dirt, right? She was quite scandalous, but God judged both of them for it. Ahab went about fasting and mourning for what he's done, humbling himself before the Lord. Because of that, God said he wouldn't bring the catastrophe upon him or in his lifetime, and instead, brought it on afterwards. But his wife, though, all I can say is nasty work, right? That's in 1 Kings 21. And then Nehemiah went into fasting and prayer to show commitment to the work of God. That's in Nehemiah 1-2, right? We also fast to overcome temptation and to dedicate ourselves to the Lord. Big example of this one is basically the temptation of Jesus, right? Jesus was denying the flesh and connecting more with God the Father for 40 days and 40 nights. So when Satan came to tempt him with the same temptations he used on Adam, which was lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, Jesus was like, nah, fall back. And basically he was just like, he beat the temptation and then had a buffet with some angels. That's what it says. Not coincidentally, Jesus began his ministry right after that. And that's found in Matthew 4, verses 1-11. So, finally, fasting is a way to express love and to worship God. Prophetess Anna did this in Luke 2, verse 37. Right? So, understanding the reasons for fasting, it's pretty easy to determine the benefits spiritually that you get from it, right? And what you would experience through the practice of fasting. You get a more robust spiritual life. You get a closer relationship with God. And you get victory, right? Because fasting is also, coincidentally, maybe not so coincidentally, fasting is also a tool of spiritual warfare. And I'm going back to the opening here of this episode. I've never been one to line up with that way of thinking, in the sense that it was like, yes, I know there's a spiritual realm, and I know spiritual warfare exists. I just never saw myself on the battlefield. So, almost in my naivete, I step out on the battlefield without really knowing, and I get chipped up. And then I realize, oh, that's a battlefield right there. That's kind of what happened, right? Because I'm just going along trying to do good, and that's it. And I didn't consider all that other stuff as much. But now that we have all that out of the way, what fasting is and the benefits of fasting and all that fun stuff, how do you go about starting, strategically to fast, right? So there's a few tips, and they're small tips, but it'll be enough to get you started, right? You want to start small and work your way into it, right? If you've never fasted before, you don't want to go and fast for like 72 hours, right? Like, you don't want to jump into a 3-day fast if you've never done it before. And you don't want to do a 3-day fast of just drinking water, right? Like, you don't want to do, It's tough. It's tough. So you got to start small, work your way into it. So maybe, one day, maybe don't break your fast, right? So skip breakfast and then go through the day a little bit, right? Or skip a meal, and then the next time you do it, maybe skip 2 meals, and then you go from there, right? You have to plan what you're going to do during, eat time, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. And again, I'm talking from a physiological perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective, combined, same time right here, right? Sure, you could fast to improve your health, right? You could use it as a way to improve your health. But to really get the most out of it, you should do something that's productive, like that's maybe even better for your health. Or from a spiritual perspective, pray more, read more. So like dedicate that time that you would for eating, however long that may be, and dedicate that towards something, another growth proposition, right? Like something else that's going to cause you to grow and be better, either in your health or in your physical health or your spiritual health, right? Or mental health or emotional health, right? Do something that's productive with that time, right? And from a believer's perspective, that should be prayer, reading, locked in 100% all the way, right? And another tip is to try different types of fast, right? Maybe do a couple days of intermittent fasting, switch up the times, play with it a little bit. Maybe full fasting, maybe just, maybe just food fasting, maybe food and water fasting for a time. Like try different things, and see, what works for you best, but also what like causes you to grow the most, right? And again, the growth is constantly in this. So you want to grow in your health or you want to grow in your soul. Ideally, you want to grow in both, right? You can also do partial fast, so it doesn't necessarily have to be like, hey, look, I'm a fast from all food for a certain period of time. You can also just fast from certain foods at a certain time. This is what Daniel did, right? So it's just certain foods I'm just staying away from, right? That one's a little different, only because you're still taking on the process of eating, right? So the strategy has to change a little bit there, okay? But you also you have to plan ahead in terms of, and this is kind of like a two-parter, right? So you want to consult with a doctor first, your doctor, who you trust, who knows what they're talking about, right? But consult with your doctor first to see, because some people might not be able to do it. At the same time, you have to plan for certain medications. If there's certain medications that you have to take, then you kind of have to strategize and plan around those medications as well, right? So just don't jump into fast and fast from your medications if those things are keeping you alive. So, yeah, right? So that's why consult with the doctor first and plan around those medications that you need to do, right? And it really just, plan, and not even just medications and supplements, right? Just plan ahead. Just make sure you plan ahead. And then coming out of the fast, this would be my last tip for this. Coming out of the fast, don't overload on carbs and fats. So if you're going to break your fast, do not have a feast. That's a one-way ticket to heart attackville, right? So breaking your fast, you want to break it with some protein and you want to ease into it. You don't want to overload on anything, but you want to start off with some protein, okay? And then slowly reintroduce carbs and fats and all that fun stuff. But man, if you overload up front, you're going to have some chest pains. So those are the quick tips to, get you started on fasting, and just things to be kind of mindful of as you're going into it, right? But that is fasting in a small nutshell with a few rants on the side, right? And it's a great process. It's a great process. Nothing is magical about it in and of itself. It's more so from a physiological perspective, at least, it's all about the energy balance, right? It's another tool that you can use to affect your body's energy balance. And this is one way to help you lose weight. It's another way to help your body start that cleanup process. But at the end of the day, it is a tool that you can use to improve your health. Now, from a spiritual side, it's everything. It's how you wage war in the spiritual realm. It's how you strengthen your prayer. It's how you get closer to God. It's everything. And it's interesting because I did not place as much importance on the fasting side of things as I do now. So I'm going to chalk that up as you live and you learn and you keep it pushing, right? But there's fasting, okay? There's fasting in a very small nutshell. There is way more to dig here, but I just wanted to give y'all enough to kind of chew on, think about, and go off of here, right? All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Episode 33. How did I forget? Man. Yeah, look, these little attacks that I was taking on starting to do a number on me. Now, actually, believe it or not, these occurrences, these situations, however you want to label it, you can label it that way. But as far as I'm concerned, the way I see it is these are attacks because they are immediately placed in a situation in which before something good happens. And it's funny, I'm starting to find it's weird, but I'm starting to find the joy in the attack. Because now I know I'm in the fight. It's one thing when you're not actually in the fight. It means you're not doing anything that's going to cause you to be on that radar, which means you're not doing good. And that's so it's just like, it's interesting, and you'd be surprised. I mean, look, I guess I was sitting on the sideline for a while and just didn't know it. And I just wandered out onto the battlefield and didn't know it. That's okay though. Because like I said, I'm finding joy in this whole thing. It's interesting. And it allows me to tell y'all more stories. Because things are going on. But listen, that's fasting. Okay? Fasting from a physical perspective, fasting from a spiritual perspective. It's a great practice, right? We can dispel some of the magic that happens when it comes to the physical side, though, right? It's not magic in and of itself, right? But we can overemphasize, and we can emphasize even more after that, the benefits when it comes to your soul and what it does in your relationship with God. Major. But I'm not going to hold y'all too much longer. Until next time, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio. And you just got finished listening to the Scout Method podcast. Your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Holistic fitness. Let's go. See you on the next one. Y'all take care.